Well, we're going to continue our series, Wisdom for Life. We're going through the New Testament letter written by James, the brother of Jesus. And wisdom's obviously the theme of this series. It's called Wisdom for Life. And so even though maybe each week this theme is not overtly felt or at the forefront, it's there underneath every subject that we talk about, every practical truth that we talk about. Wisdom for life is so important. However, today, wisdom is the overt theme of the message. As we continue in James chapter 1, wisdom is the major theme of what we'll talk about today. We will come back to the theme of wisdom in a slightly different way in about 5 or 6 weeks, in a very unique way. But we're going to look today, we're going to look at what wisdom is. We're going to define what it is, but how James defines it, and look at why it's useful. We'll kind of do a survey of wisdom throughout the Proverbs to see why it's useful. And then we'll also look at, if we're not careful, how we can misuse wisdom, or how we can see it incorrectly, and it's not really the way it's designed to be. So that's what we're going to look at today, is really this wisdom for life, what it is. And wisdom is something, I don't think this is, a stretch to say, wisdom is something that we all could use, right? We all need wisdom. However, James will tell us that wisdom is sometimes something that we don't have. There are certain situations that we face and we are just stuck. We are frozen. We are confused. We don't know what to do next. We don't want to make the wrong move, so we need wisdom. We need God to give us his wisdom. And so James chapter 1, verse 5 is our launching point today. James will tell us what to do. We need it. We need wisdom, but what do we do if we lack wisdom? James 1, verse 5, he's very clear on what we do. James says, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. So if, like we did last week with temptation, if wisdom is our key theme today, it will be helpful to define what exactly we're talking about. And if you look at the original Greek in which James wrote this letter, and the New Testament's written in Greek, the word he uses there shows us what wisdom is and why we need it so bad. So the Greek word for wisdom there is Sophia. And so you might think of, it's like philosophy. Well, the word philosophy means love of wisdom. Philo is love, Sophia is wisdom. So philosophy is the love of wisdom. However, I also went to the Hebrew, and that word is chokmah. And so what you see with really any words, but especially with ancient languages, you're going to find multiple meanings for one singular word, and it might shift based on where it's found. So I did some digging this week, and what I discovered is that both of these words have the same types of definitional meanings to them, even though they're different languages. And so two of the words that come up in both of these lists that define what wisdom is are skill and prudence. So the ancients understood wisdom in this way. This is what we're going to focus on, that wisdom is a skill. You may never have thought of that, but wisdom is a skill. And it's a specific skill. It's really the skill of prudence. That's sort of, you put these together. So here's our working definition of what wisdom is according to James in James 1:5 as we get going today. Wisdom is the skill of living carefully and intentionally. That's a definition of what wisdom is. It's a skill of living carefully and intentionally. And I don't know about you, but I could use some of that. I could use more of that skill in living in an intentional way, in a careful way, in a thoughtful, prudent way. That's what wisdom is. And James says here in verse 5 of chapter 1, if you need it, ask God for it. And I love what he says there. He says God won't rebuke you for asking. So when you go to God, really for anything, but in this case for wisdom, he's not like, don't bother me with that again. You asked me for wisdom last time you needed help. Like, let it go. He doesn't do that. He's not saying, you need more wisdom? Like, what are you? No. James says he's not going to rebuke you for asking. I would argue, in fact, God might rebuke you for not asking, right? So when we try to live life on our own without his wisdom, a lot of times I can just imagine God doing the palm to forehead move. Like, seriously? I'm willing to generously guide you. I want to give you wisdom for life. Why won't you ask me for what you know that you need, what everyone needs? And so, it's almost, I thought of it, it's almost like when you watch a toddler carrying a plate of food at Thanksgiving. You're like, whoa, no, just ask me for help. But no, they're independent and they want to do it. And sometimes that they make it and sometimes they don't make it. But God is generous. He will give wisdom generously when you ask for it. He'll give you wisdom out your ears if you ask him for it. Maybe not, that's not literally what you need, but figuratively that's what he'll give you. And that's because, let's skip down to James 1, 16 and 17. The reason, this is God's nature and character, to be generous and giving, to give good gifts. Look at what James says in verses 16 and 17 of chapter 1. He says, don't be misled, my dear brothers and sisters. Whatever is good and perfect is a gift coming down to us from God our Father, who created all the lights in the heavens. He never changes or casts a shifting shadow. Do you know someone who is just an excellent gift giver? I mean, they just know exactly the right thing to get the right person at the right time every time. And it's such a beautiful bag or box, and they put so much time into it and so much intention, and they just love giving. And it's almost like too much. That's the nature of God. Maybe you've not heard this for a while, or maybe you don't feel this right now. Let me just tell you, God loves you so much. And he has so many good gifts that he desires to give you, one of them being wisdom. And so when it comes to this gift of wisdom, God is eager to give it to us. Now the question is why? Why is God so eager to give us wisdom? Why is he just so ready to just dish it out whenever we need it? And the answer is because he knows how important and vital wisdom is. He knows what a valuable commodity wisdom is. He knows that it's an important part of life. Wisdom is everything. So let's look at Proverbs. We'll be in the Proverbs quite a bit today, kind of doing a scan of wisdom here in just a minute. But let's begin with this idea. God is so generous in giving wisdom because he knows how important and vital it is. So Proverbs 1 verse 7 says, the fear of the Lord is the foundation of true knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. And then skip down Proverbs 9 verse 10. Similarly, it says, fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. So again, go back to that toddler carrying that full plate of food at Thanksgiving, and you're like, whoa, okay? Just like that, sometimes we live our lives trying to do it in our own wisdom. That's really the theme later on in Proverbs is earthly wisdom versus heavenly wisdom, but that's a subject for a different day. But we sometimes are just very stubborn. I want to do this my way. I want to go my direction. I want to, whatever. And so sometimes, like the child with the plate, we make it to the table unscathed. All the food is on the plate and not on the floor or on our shirt. Sometimes, just like the mashed potatoes slip off, but everything else makes it. Sometimes we get lucky when we try it on our own. Sometimes it works. Sometimes we just totally drop the plate completely and make a mess that has to be cleaned up. Sometimes it gets so bad that we drop the plate, we fall on the plate, we roll around in the food on the plate, and then we're like, oh no, I need a new change of clothes. We need God's wisdom. And God desires to give us the help that we need, the wisdom that we need for our good, so we can get to the table every time, totally clean with all of our food on the plate. God knows his way is best, but he needs us to know that. That's what wisdom shows us. God's wisdom is always best, but we need to know that his wisdom is the best. And so this series is Wisdom for Life. So wisdom is useful in everyday life, in every area of your life. And so I want to just spend a few minutes going through basically this is a quick survey of the book of Proverbs, just going through a few key areas of life, just to prove James's point and the premise of what we're talking about is wisdom is sort of like a Swiss Army knife. It has so many uses. It can work in any situation. It's like the MacGyver of virtue, okay? It can get you out of certain situations. It can keep you from certain situations. It's just so helpful. So we're going to look at a few of these key things. I do want to first start with the two main ideas that we've started this series with. God gives us wisdom in tests that we face, and God gives us wisdom in temptation that we face as well. So let's start with that, and then we'll get into other things from the Proverbs more specifically. But wisdom is helpful in tests. So we're going to stay in James again. James 1, go up to verse 12. We read this last week, but it bears repeating here to see how we have wisdom in tests. James 1:12, God blesses those who patiently endure testing and temptation. Afterward, they will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. The main thing that wisdom gives in tests in life is perspective in those tests. So he says that God blesses those who endure testing. That doesn't seem to make sense on the surface, but wisdom shows us over time how that is true. Wisdom helps us to see beyond the surface of the test that we're facing, to think, what might God actually be doing here? I know what's happening to me, but what might God be doing that I'm not completely aware of on the surface? Wisdom also in tests will help us to ask, how can I lean into God more? How can I not try to get through this difficulty on my own, because I probably won't very well? How can I lean into him more? Wisdom also will encourage us and show us, how can I lean into my support system of people around me more? How can I not be super stubborn and just, I'm going to do this myself, but how can I lean into those around me? Wisdom helps us with attitude, perspective, and also attitude during tests. So it's, again, like I said a couple weeks ago, this does not mean we ignore problems that happen because they happen. This doesn't mean that we just wish them away, but perspective and attitude are important. Wisdom helps us from losing faith or lacking hope or becoming angry or bitter at people or even at God. Wisdom helps us to navigate these things. Wisdom helps us to see how our test can become a testimony. How can this terrible thing that I'm going through that I would not wish on anyone, how can I use it to help someone else going through something similar? Wisdom shows us how to think that way, how to do that. It's wisdom. That's how we work through test and wisdom. And then temptation we looked at last week. Wisdom is super helpful when it comes to temptation. We're going to get out of James and Proverbs for a second. I was going to put this in last week, but I thought it kind of fits here better today. And so we're in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. And Paul, of all people, is going to show us how wisdom helps us in temptation that we face in life. So 1 Corinthians 10:13, Paul says this, "The temptations in your life are no different from what others experience, and God is faithful. He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure." This is one of those passages that gets misread all the time. People say God won't give you more than you can bear. That's like tests. The definition of a test is God giving you more than you can bear. So that's not what this verse is talking about. It's talking about temptation. God will not allow temptation to be so much that you can't escape. I think that's important here. So wisdom helps us to see the escape hatch in a temptation. Wisdom helps us to avoid certain situations before they become a mess that wrecks our lives. Wisdom, godly wisdom, the wisdom that God gives does that. And an interesting thing here, I think wisdom also shows us from this verse that the temptations in your life are no different from anybody else. Now, they're different, but they're not different in kind, but not different in degree. So sometimes we think of, well, my temptation is harder for me. No. It's just different from somebody else. It's not harder than somebody else's. It's different. So we're not talking, temptation is not degree of difficulty. It's not gymnastics or figure skating. Temptation is across the board, hard for everyone. But it is custom made. Your temptation is not harder than mine. It's different than mine. My temptation's not harder than yours. It's custom made for me. That's why it's hard for me. Maybe not, that thing is not hard for you. But the idea of temptation, not James, Paul is saying here, is not degree of difficulty. It's just custom made. And so if we can, wisdom helps us though to see that. This thing that is threatening to wreck my life, it's not going to affect the person sitting next to me or even my spouse, but they have a thing that is threatening to always wreck their life if they're not careful. So it's the idea of that, but wisdom helps us to see that God is faithful, that God will always show you a way out. There's always a trap door somewhere in every temptation that we face. There's always a little glimmer of light. We can push that little window up and crawl our way out. There's always a way out. But it's God's wisdom that he gives that shows us what that escape hatch, what that window out is. Wisdom will help us to see those things. And again, remember, wisdom is skillfully living a careful and intentional life. Again, I'm not preaching on temptation again, but I'll get off this with this point. Wisdom will help us to live that way because most of the time when we give into temptation, sometimes it's a slow burn, it's a grind, but sometimes it's impulsive. I would say most temptation is impulsive. And so if we're living a careful, intentional life of wisdom that God gives, he can help us to avoid temptation in many ways. Okay, so those are two areas that we've seen so far in James. But let's look just quickly at a couple of other key areas in life where wisdom is helpful. Wisdom for life, again, is the theme here, right? So wisdom is key in relationships. And there's really two parts of this. There's the good and the bad. Wisdom helps us to avoid bad relationships, and wisdom helps us to cultivate good relationships. Let's look at both of those. We'll be in the Proverbs here for a little bit, looking at some of these, just kind of hitting them really quick here. So wisdom will show us how we can avoid or work through bad relationships. Proverbs 2:12, look at this. It says this: wisdom will save you from evil people, from those whose words are twisted. I don't have to tell you this, but the reality is life is not a Western film, okay? If it were, I would know who the good guys are. They're wearing the white hat. I would know who the bad guys are. They're wearing the black hat. That is not how life works. People can be very deceptive in how they are. They can put up a front. They can put up a face. They can really fool you for a long time on who they really are. And then when you get to know them, you're like shocked that they've revealed something about their character that didn't, like, they slipped that black hat on all of a sudden, you know? But it takes us by surprise. Wisdom helps us navigate bad relationships. Even it says here, wisdom can help us untwist people's twisted words. Sometimes people will try to fool you with like fancy language, and they try to obfuscate. That's a fun word. They try to do that. Even that word is sort of like the definition of the word. They try to make it confusing on you. And so sometimes we get sucked into people's delusions. Wisdom helps us to kind of untie the knots that people try to tie us in. Wisdom gives clarity on dealing with people. I've got this feeling maybe I shouldn't share that personal information with them because maybe they're going to use it against me in the future. They're going to hold it over me. So maybe that wisdom helps us to do that. Maybe I shouldn't go into business with that person because they seem kind of sleazy, so I'm going to avoid that. Maybe I don't want to work at this place because I hear their culture is not great. Wisdom helps us navigate relationships in life. It kind of raises the hair on the back of your neck to be, it's sort of like danger, Will Robinson, danger. I've just really dated myself. I'm not even that old, How do I even know what that reference is? I'm so old. I'm like 89 years old inside, okay? I don't look it on the outside, but I'm literally 50 years older than I really am on the inside. Yeah, my wife says yes and amen to that. All right. Wisdom will help you see people for who they really are. Now, this doesn't mean look for the bad in everyone. That's not what we're saying. But we're saying it can help you to notice a change in someone that's going to help you avoid heartbreak or hurt or something that happened in your life. You're going to notice that and be like, something's off. Maybe we should talk about that right away, or maybe I should ask a question. Maybe I should try to get to something underneath the surface right away. Wisdom is available to help us navigate relationships and hopefully avoid or work through negative ones. It's a good defense mechanism. However, it's not just that. It can also help us to cultivate good relationships, which I think is even more beneficial to our actual everyday lives. Look at these two proverbs. You might be aware of these. Proverbs 27:17 says, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend. And Proverbs 17:17 says, a friend is always loyal, and a brother is born to help in time of need. So wisdom, again, doesn't just show us the worst in people, it shows us the best in people. Wisdom will show you the kind of people that you want to gravitate toward. That's a person of character that I can trust. That's a person that I can be around, and they're going to sharpen me to become a better me. Wisdom helps us to see the kind of people that we want to keep close. Wisdom helps us to value and appreciate those people too. Not to just use them or take them for granted, but it also helps us to see that quality is sometimes better than quantity. That's an okay thing too. And with this, and then we'll move on, wisdom also reminds us that relationships are two ways. So I don't just want to be sharpened by someone, but how can I sharpen them in the process? Wisdom helps us to see the importance and value of relationships. Wisdom will help us to see, do I just expect people to be loyal to me, or am I willing to be loyal to them too? Remember, a brother is born to help in time of need. So wisdom helps us to really pray this prayer. God, heighten my awareness of the good, positive people in my life that I need to be around, And also, God, help me to learn through wisdom how I can help them as well. How this can be a mutually beneficial relationship with those around me. So wisdom is key in relationships, which is vitally important. How about this? Parenting. Maybe you're not a parent. You can check out for the next minute or two, okay? But wisdom is good in parenting. It's super helpful. You probably know this proverb as well. Proverbs 22, verse 6. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. I got to give some bad news again really quickly. Proverbs are not promises. Okay? People claim this verse, and they're like, well, my child never panned out. You know, what happened? God lied. Proverbs, this is not promises, chapter 22, verse 6. A proverb is a saying of wisdom that in most cases, if you do this, this should follow, but it's not a guarantee. I want to be very careful. Every time I reference this, I want to point that out. And it really, here's a thing I've never really thought of till recently. The point of this proverb, I don't think, is to guarantee that your child will turn out the way that you want them to. This proverb is for the parent. The proverb is for me to do my part, and then they have to do their part. Then that's not up to me. The point of the proverb is a reminder, a challenge for parents. My job is to do all I can to set them up for success. That's the best I can do. That's the most I can hope for. And wisdom helps me discover how I can do that better and better as a parent. That's really the point of this proverb. Wisdom in this, I think, revolves a lot of self-reflection for parenting. Am I being the kind of person that I want my child to be? Am I doing the things that do as I say, not as I do? That is not a good strategy for raising healthy, well-adjusted, Christ-centered children. It's just not a good strategy, right? How can I be this role model for my kids that I want them to be? Wisdom helps us parent also when our children are different ages. And so maybe your kids are grown and they're out of the house. You're still their parent. It's going to look different than it did when they were 6 years old and they did everything you said. It's different when they're teenagers. It's different when they're adults, but you're still their parent. And so wisdom helps us navigate those changes as they grow, as we grow. It helps us in these key areas, even with parenting as time passes. So now, even if you're not a parent, you are a child of a parent, and so that was helpful either way. So hopefully you didn't fall asleep. So here's the next area. A key area. We'll do one more, and then we'll get back to James for just a couple minutes here. Wisdom is helpful also in helping us be more patient and with our emotions. I'm kind of putting those two together. Look at these two more proverbs here. Proverbs 14:29 says, people with understanding control their anger. A hot temper shows great foolishness. And then Proverbs 15, verse 18, a hot-tempered person stirs up conflict, but the one who is patient calms a quarrel. And I can say I've definitely lived these truths out. I have acted one way and gotten one result. I've tried to act the other way and gotten a different and better result. This proverb, it's not a promise, but it is absolutely true. It works. And remember, again, wisdom is carefully and intentionally living. It's a skill of living carefully and intentionally. And so wisdom is so important in this area of patience and our emotions. Wisdom helps us to see that uncontrolled anger never solves the problem. It never calms things down. Losing your temper never helps solve the problem. It never calms things down. Wisdom reminds us we don't have to react in the moment. I want to. I feel like I'm justified in doing so, but wisdom says, hang on, we're living carefully and intentionally. That may not be the best move. It may, in fact, be the worst move. Wisdom helps us to kind of pump the brakes. Wisdom helps us avoid quick, harsh words that once they're out, there's no rewind button. You can't take that back. Those words are there forever. And in some ways, they are stamped indelibly on the person's mind and heart that we have lashed out to. So wisdom helps us to avoid some of those words. Wisdom helps us avoid knee-jerk reactions that we'll later regret. Well, it's a nice, shiny new truck that I can't afford. Let's sign the deal, Wisdom helps you to say, no, stop, don't do that. Even just practical things like that. Wisdom is so helpful with patience and with our emotions. Wisdom helps to keep us from being driven by every immediate emotion that we have. Helps us to live carefully and intentionally. Wisdom is useful in so many other areas. Even next week, it's not really the theme of wisdom, even though the theme of this series is wisdom for life. But next week, we'll spend a little bit of time talking about our speech and our tongue, that sort of thing. That's coming next week, so please come back for that, all right? That sounds fun. But wisdom is practical. It's useful. It's helpful. And that's why God wants to give it to us, because we need it for everything. Wisdom for life. It's so important. And when we ask, James says God gives it generously. But then let's go back up to verses 6 through 8. James, I'm going to close this. James closes this opening section about wisdom. It's important, but he gives a caution that we want to be careful of with asking God for wisdom. So let's look at James chapter 1, verses 6 through 8, and look at this caution that James gives us. He says, "But when you ask him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. Do not waver, for a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. Such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Their loyalty is divided between God and the world, and they are unstable in everything they do." Now, he's just got through saying in verse 5, if you need wisdom, ask God and he'll give it liberally. And then he kind of spanks us a little bit. He's like, yeah, you watch yourself. It doesn't seem to quite fit. So what does this section have to do with verse 5 about God will give it, God will give it? I think what James is telling us here is we want to be careful not to misuse or abuse the gift of wisdom that God so freely gives. And here's how we do that. Wisdom is not designed to be a magical emergency cleanup crew every time you wreck your life when you negated what God's wisdom would have told you to do. Now, when we sin, when we make a mess of situations, God will forgive you, certainly. His grace is greater than any sin. He is there to kind of help you pick up the pieces of your life. But you can't wisdom your way out of consequences of your actions. That's, I think, what James is kind of getting at. So he's almost, think of someone like trying to straddle, the line in between. I'm over here, I'm over there. That's what he's saying. He's saying, be careful that you don't try to use wisdom as a preemptive, like forgiveness for the sin I'm about to commit sort of thing. He's like, that's not what wisdom is. That's not what God gives. Please don't seek that. And I think he's saying this. He says, be sure that your faith is in God alone. He says, don't have divided loyalty. When you get to the Greek of that Greek word there is bisychos, or I don't want to say bisychos because it sounds like you're psycho, but it's like two minds. Double-minded is the word he uses there. And scholars can't really find that word hardly anywhere else, so James might have just invented a word in James chapter 1. It's a pretty cool thing to consider. He's saying someone asking God in the wrong mindset their mind is split, they're divided, their loyalty is divided. So he's cautioning us to not misuse wisdom as a fallback. For instance, God, I'm going to do what I want, but give me wisdom when it doesn't work out. It's not quite what wisdom truly is. It's not living carefully and intentionally. Or, God, I'm mostly committed to your way, but I'm going to try to Burger King my way and have it my way. That's not wisdom. That's not what God is giving. That's not what he's not what he's offering. If wisdom is a gracious gift from God, and if we're going to receive it from him, we have to see it correctly and then use it correctly. So we want to seek wisdom while being tempted, predominantly, not always after we've gone after our desires to clean up our mess. God's like, I will help you learn something through this, but hopefully that means the next time that temptation comes, you've learned the lesson on the front end and not just seen wisdom on the back end. That's what James is cautioning us, is to not misuse or misappropriate God's wisdom. So how do we avoid this? Let's close with one more proverb, and then we'll wrap it up. Proverbs 4, 5 through 7 will tell us how to avoid this trap that James is telling us to avoid. Don't be double-minded. Don't say, God, I'm going to do it my way, and then I'm going to do it your way. He's like, no. So how do we do that? How do we live this wisdom for life? Proverbs 4, verses 5 through 7. It says this, get wisdom, and then catch this, develop good judgment. Don't forget my words or turn away from them. Don't turn your back on wisdom, for she will protect you. Love her, and she will guard you. Getting wisdom is the wisest thing you can do, and whatever else you do, develop good judgment. I'll say the definition that we're using for wisdom again. Wisdom is the skill of living carefully and intentionally. Twice in Proverbs 4, verse 5 and verse 7, he says, develop good judgment. It's a skill. Wisdom is a skill. You can get better at it. The idea is the lessons that you learn through wisdom now will build and build and build and carry you into greater things. So you're not repeating the same mistakes over. So you're not blindsided by those same people over and over. So that you're not the same person that you were 10 years ago, 10 years from now. Wisdom helps us. It's a skill that is developed. It's like a muscle. The more you work it, the stronger it gets. You know, it's like the Chiefs who are going to dominate the Eagles today, okay? I'm not a prophet, but maybe I am. We'll see. I'll let you know if I'm a prophet in about 6 hours, okay? No. The Chiefs, they are professional football players. They are highly skilled. They are super athletic. They are like the top half of the top 1% of all specimens on the earth. But guess what? They practice all week long to get better. Because maybe I dropped that pass, I need to run that route a little bit tighter. I need to not throw the ball into triple coverage next time. They gain wisdom because they train, and they're professional athletes. Wisdom is the same way. The more we do it, the better we get at it. The more we try to hone those skills and learn those lessons, the more wise we become. It's wisdom for life. Wisdom is not just a switch that you flip. Did I say that right? Yeah. It's not a switch that you flip and just say, oh, I'm going to use wisdom now. No, it's a skill that you hone. You get better at it as you practice it. You hone those skills. It's a way of life, not just a switch that is flipped. So we need wisdom in all these areas. God offers it to us. If you lack wisdom, ask God. Don't wait till later. If you need wisdom right now, ask Him. In that moment of indecision, ask Him for wisdom. With your questions and doubts, ask Him for wisdom. He will give it generously to you. And over, as you work those muscles, it gets stronger. As you hone those skills, you get better. And the result is that you will live a happier, fuller, more peaceful, more Christ-like life as you ask for and live in the wisdom that God generously gives. Let's pray today as we close. God, we need your wisdom for life. We've gone through several key areas of life, but there are so many more that we could have gone through. No matter what the issue is, you will give wisdom if we need it and ask for it. No matter what the situation is, you will give wisdom if we need it and as we ask for it. You are so generous and loving to us, and you want to give us wisdom for life. So God, help us to live lives of wisdom. Help us to grow in this skill of living carefully and intentionally. And help us to hear the caution of James at the end here, to not misuse or abuse wisdom, to not try to do it our way 99% of the time, but then beg you for wisdom on the back end all the time. Help us to grow in wisdom, to mature in wisdom, to be strengthened in wisdom for the things that are ahead. We need wisdom, so we ask you for it, and you will give it. May we walk this week, even today as we leave this place, may we walk each and every day intentionally, methodically, in your wisdom, not trying to do it on our own power or strength or intellect, but seeking your will and your wisdom for every key area and decision in life. And we thank you that you give it to us beautifully, graciously, generously, and we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen.